G'day, and today we're going to make a quick video about going beyond carbon neutral. Lots of people, particularly businesses, are talking about carbon neutral today. They're marketing themselves as having achieved carbon neutral, that this is a fantastic thing. Well, it's not a bad thing, let's be clear. And well done to those businesses that are taking those steps. But I guess my point is to say, I don't think it's enough. We need to go beyond carbon neutral. We actually have to start taking carbon out of the atmosphere. But like all of these terms, and sometimes people use terms with different meanings. So I thought today we'd make a quick video to talk about what carbon neutral implies and why we need to go beyond it, and how My Carbon Zero inspires action to do that. So we've got the flip chart here, and let's just talk, this could be about an individual or it could be a business. So let's just imagine here, this is the street in front of my house, and when I was born back in 1964, I started creating some carbon emissions because I ate, I had clothes, all of these things had embedded carbon. And so back in 1964, when I was born, I started being responsible for some carbon emissions. 1965, 1966, probably not a lot being added to my pile at that stage, but because I was just a small baby. But in time, over many years, all the way up to today, as I travelled around the world, as I got myself a car, I did all sorts of things, my pile of carbon emissions, my rubbish on the street that I've been putting out there, the carbon emissions that I emit every year, have grown and grown and grown to here we are. Let's say this is 2019. So this is where I got to in December 31st last year. Fantastic. Now, 2020, let's say I'm going to make this many carbon emissions in 2020. Okay, so without a carbon neutral program, the idea is that this carbon here is just going to go up into the atmosphere. So the idea of carbon neutral is to say, okay, let's imagine as an individual that might be maybe 10 tons of carbon a year, but let's talk about a company. Okay, let's say a company, reasonable sized company, could be a big company, could be a small company. Obviously the amount of carbon that each company puts out there will be different, but let's say 1,000 tons of carbon will be emitted by this particular company this year with its travel, with all of the services and energy that it uses, the embedded carbon in the products that it uses, the paper, things like that. Let's say it's 1,000. Many companies have much more than that. This is just a number. So the idea of carbon neutral is to say, okay, 1,000 tons. Let's find a project somewhere else in the world that also has 1,000 tons, okay? And let's invest in activities that means that doesn't get emitted, okay? So you invest in activities which means that 1,000 ton doesn't get emitted. So in a sense, you're saying that 1,000 ton in a way becomes below the line. So the idea is using mathematics is that is cancelled by that. So my 1,000 tons is cancelled, or let's use the term that everyone else uses, is offset by the 1,000 tons that doesn't get emitted because of the dollars that I've invested in the particular project. Okay, this is carbon neutrality, which depends on offsetting. Now, I've got a few problems with that, and I think we've seen in many ways that it's not working because carbon emissions the world over are going up. Now, that some people who are proponents of carbon neutrality, proponents of offsetting would say, well, that's because not enough people are doing it. That's true. We do need more people to do it. And if the whole world tried to go carbon neutral, we'd be in a better place. Okay, but not enough. And I'll tell you why. Because there's a couple of reasons. What normally happens is that people who develop these projects often get a bit excited, and they predict that 1,000 tons will be saved, but life intervenes and maybe only 800 get saved. In the worst cases, maybe only 100 get saved. And so the net result is that instead of 1,000 tons being emitted here and 1,000 tons being saved over there, we don't save as much. And this is all around the process of auditing project development. If you're a project developer, you need to talk up this number so that you can get more carbon credits, okay, that you can sell more. So there's a whole incentive in the project development process to boost up this number. Happens, for example, in tree planting or in energy saving projects where it just doesn't save as much as people save and plan for it to save. So that's the first problem. Less actually gets saved over here. Meanwhile, this company advertising themselves as legend and heroes when they've done a good thing, they've invested some money, but they haven't had the impact that they thought. But for me, there's a broader sense. There's a broader issue. There's two broader issues. One is that 1,000 tonnes is still being emitted. It's still going to go onto the pile over here, this pile of lifetime emissions. If it's me as a person or it's a company, it will go on top of this pile of lifetime emissions. Okay, so that's the first problem. The fact that you've saved some over here is great to be encouraged, but the reality is that 1,000 tonnes is still being emitted. Okay, so this is where we come to this discussion of how do we go beyond this whole question of carbon neutral. The big problem I have with carbon neutral is that this is just on a 1-year basis. And this huge pile that's driving climate change is still out there. Carbon up in the atmosphere, driving climate change today. We need to reduce those things. So with my carbon zero, this is where our R1, R2 and R3 actions come in. So your R1 actions that we talk about, and instead of 1,000 tonnes, you invest in projects, you invest in actions within your business or within your life, if you're an individual, where you drop that down. And maybe that drops down to maybe 200. Fantastic. Okay, so you've done a whole series of actions, and instead of 1,000 tonnes, you're now only emitting 200 tonnes. But that goes on the pile over here. So instead of it being an additional 1,000 tonnes, no, it's not that. We've just added 200 tonnes. That's your R1 actions. Now your R2 actions is this. That's why we say we're not against this. This is fine. Do invest. Please do invest in projects that reduce emissions elsewhere. But it comes after you've made efforts to reduce your own emissions. So reduce your own emissions and then invest in projects that does reduce emissions elsewhere. So that's great. But that doesn't count for you. That you are still putting 200 tonnes on the pile. It doesn't make it magically disappear. It just means that you're doing a good thing somewhere else. And that's to be encouraged and to be celebrated and applauded. But on its own, it doesn't address this massive pile of stink bomb over here that's polluting the planet right now, polluting our atmosphere. So we've got our R1, R2 actions, but the key element of R3 that no one is talking about, with the exception of Microsoft, and congratulations to the folk at Microsoft who have pledged to take all of this since inception in 1975 out of the atmosphere. Okay, and in my case, 1964, when I was born, my overall emissions, I can't remember, they're about 700 tonnes, something like that I've put up into the atmosphere since 1964. My job with my R3 actions is to invest in projects that take a chunk of this and either put it below the ground, for example, in a soil carbon project like our friends at Husk Ventures in Cambodia are doing, put it below the ground, plant some trees, like the folk at Trillion Trees, and get the carbon into there. There could be projects on restoring peatlands and helping the peatlands store carbon again, seagrass. There's a whole range of project activities that we need under R3 to take this out. And so this year I've invested some money to take out 36 tonnes with Husk. Next year I'll take out a bit more, maybe I'll make a little bit more money and I can take out a big chunk, and eventually this pile becomes down to zero. So this disappears. That's what we need from R3. So playing around over here, even if you just reduce your emissions, it's great, please do it. Even if you do that and then add on to take emissions out elsewhere, that's great, please do it. But don't leave this baby out there polluting the planet right now. And that's where we need R3 actions. That's what we mean by going beyond neutrality. Neutrality is this game over here, and there's hairs on it. It's got all the problems of certification, all the problems of being audited. It doesn't do what it says on the tin. What we do need to do is add on to that and get the R3 actions. And the last, of course, I for inspire other people to do it too. So if all of us just do this, carbon neutrality, it's great, but we're not going to make it. But if all of us take all of our carbon out of the atmosphere, get it back under the ground, get it in trees, get it in meadows, get it in seagrass, get it in mangroves, get it in peat swamps, maybe we've got a chance. Can't be sure, but we've got a better chance than if we leave this festering in the atmosphere. That's what we mean by going beyond carbon neutrality.